Welcome to Heart Over Gold, the channel where love, kindness, and humanity shine brighter than any fortune. In today's story, Kenny Randall, a self-made real estate mogul, had everything anyone could dream of. An opulent mansion overlooking the Boston coast, a thriving business empire, and a beautiful, pregnant wife named Jade Michael. To the outside world, they were the picture of perfection. But when Jade disappears one stormy night, leaving nothing behind but unanswered questions, Kenny's world begins to unravel. Unbeknownst to him, Jade had been documenting her growing suspicions about Kenny's infidelity with his mistress, Roxanne Ortega, in a secret diary. As Eleanor's words, written from beyond the grave, reveal the dark truths of Kenny's life, his fraudulent empire, his lies, and his violent temper. The carefully constructed facade of the Randall family begins to crumble. This story is a thrilling tale of deception, betrayal, and a woman who, even in death, exposed the truth that would bring down a man and his empire. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments, and keep up with our latest stories. The perfect deception. A flawless marriage or just the perfect lie? What if the marriage of your dreams turned out to be a meticulously crafted nightmare? Tune in now to uncover this dark secret. Kenny Randall, a self-made real estate mogul, seemed to have it all. A stunning mansion by the Boston coast, a thriving business, and a beautiful, pregnant wife named Eleanor. But one fateful night, during a relentless storm, Jade vanishes without a trace. As the city holds its breath, Kenny and his mistress, Roxanne Ortega, toast to a future free of barriers. They believe their secret is safe, convinced they've pulled off the perfect crime. But they overlooked one small detail: a diary. The secrets within its pages are about to shatter their perfect world. This is the tale of how a tragic victim's words, written from beyond the grave, brought down an empire and a murderer. The Randall estate stood as a testament to new wealth. A sprawling mansion of modern glass and white stone perched on a cliff, overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. From the infinity pool, blending seamlessly with the horizon, one could watch dolphins leap through the waves. Kenny Randall loved that view. A king's view, he often thought as he gazed out upon his domain. And Jade Michael, his wife of 5 years, was meant to be his queen. Jade was breathtaking, with a quiet elegance that made other women feel insecure. She had been a librarian when they first met, a calm, bookish woman who seemed an unlikely match for the bold and ambitious Kenny. Yet, he pursued her with the same intensity he applied to his business, sweeping her off her feet with promises of a life she'd only ever dreamed of. Now, 7 months pregnant with their first child, Jade found herself living in a gilded cage. The silence in their vast, minimalist home only amplified the emptiness she felt inside. The pregnancy had been Kenny's idea, yet another acquisition to complete the image of his ideal life. He had celebrated the news with an extravagant party, telling his friends about their growing family, almost as if he himself had conceived the child through sheer willpower. Jade had smiled through it all, her hand resting on her swollen belly, simply a vessel for her husband's legacy. But recently, an unsettling sense of doubt had taken root in her. Kenny had become distant, his phone constantly in his hand, business trips more frequent, and his excuses more vague. He returned home late, with the unmistakable scent of a strange floral perfume clinging to his clothes. A scent that wasn't hers. When she asked him about it, he laughed it off, calling her paranoid, a side effect of pregnancy hormones. He would kiss her forehead and tell her he loved her, but his eyes were as empty as the glass walls of their home. The name of that perfume was Black Orchid, worn by Roxanne Marin. Roxanne was everything Jade wasn't. She was a fiery, passionate artist with wild dark curls and a laugh that could light up a room. As a rising star in the art world, her abstract work sold for astronomical prices. Kenny had become her most devoted patron, a fact he didn't even try to hide. He would boast about his discovery, hosting exclusive exhibitions and introducing her to his circle of wealthy investors. He spoke of her talent with a reverence Jade had never heard him use for anything other than a stock portfolio. Jade had met Roxanne once at a charity gala. Kenny had insisted she attend, even though she was heavily pregnant. He guided her through the crowd, his hand possessively on her back, before leaving her at the table with the other wives. He then made a beeline for Roxanne, who was captivating in a blood-red dress that clung to her every curve. Jade watched them the entire night, a cold knot forming in her stomach. She saw how Kenny looked at her, the way he leaned in, his lips brushing her ear, making her laugh. It was a look of raw, unrestrained desire, a look he hadn't given Jade in years. That night, Jade started keeping a diary, a simple leather-bound book she had since college, once filled with literary quotes and dreams of travel. Now it was her confidant, the silent keeper of her fears. October 12th. Kenny was with me again tonight. He called it a last-minute investor meeting, but he came home smelling of turpentine and black orchid. He thinks I don't know, or maybe he doesn't care. He looks through me these days, as if I'm already a ghost. Sometimes I feel like one on October 25th. I saw her car today, a classic red convertible. It was parked 2 blocks from Kenny's downtown office, the one he claims he rarely uses. I sat in my car for an hour, watching the building, my heart pounding. I feel like a fool, pregnant and afraid. Why can't I confront him? Because I'm scared. Scared of what he'll say, scared of what he'll do, scared of being alone. Her diary entries grew darker as the weeks passed, documenting late-night calls, flimsy alibis, mounting credit card bills for hotels and designer stores she'd never visited. She was building a case, though she didn't know for what. Divorce? Kenny would destroy her. Kenny Randall didn't lose. The turning point came in early December. Kenny announced an urgent business trip to Singapore. He kissed her goodbye at the door with a perfunctory peck on the cheek, telling her to take care of herself and the baby. The next day, while scrolling through social media to pass the time, Jade stumbled upon a photo posted by one of Roxanne's friends. A group shot on a sun-drenched beach. In the background, unmistakably, was Kenny, his arm wrapped around Roxanne's shoulders. The caption read, "Art in Miami has been a dream, especially with these 2 lovebirds." Eleanor's phone slipped from her fingers and crashed onto the floor. The betrayal hit her like a physical blow. It wasn't just an affair. It was an entire life he was leading without her, without their child. That moment marked a shift inside Eleanor. The fear that had consumed her for months was replaced with cold, hard determination. She wasn't going to let him discard her. She went to Kenny's home office, a sleek room she rarely entered. She knew the code to his personal safe, the date of his first major acquisition, a number he revered like a sacred relic. Her hands shook as she keyed it in. The heavy door opened, revealing stock certificates, property deeds, and files detailing offshore accounts and shell companies. A pattern of fraud that had built the Randall empire on lies. She'd discovered them months ago by accident while looking for an insurance policy. But now she knew what they meant. She had leverage, and she intended to use it. Her final diary entry was written the night before Kenny returned. December 8th. Kenny comes home tomorrow. The lie about Singapore will be the first of many I'll have to endure, but not for long. He thinks I'm weak, that I'm a fool. He has no idea what I'm capable of. He's about to find out. This is no longer just about the affair. This is about survival. My baby and me. I have a plan. I pray I'm strong enough to carry it out. That night, she tucked the diary into her handbag, went to bed, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like a ghost. She felt like a storm, gathering strength just beyond the horizon. The rain started after nightfall, a steady downpour that lashed against the glass walls of the Randall mansion. It was December 9th, the night Jade would take back control. Kenny had been home for less than 6 hours, walking in with a bouquet of golden lilies and a story about a successful deal in Singapore. He didn't even have the decency to look her in the eye as he said it. Jade played her part, smiling at him and thanking him for the flowers, while her heart burned with fury. Kenny had a plan to leave her that night, and when she confronted him, the truth came spilling out. He would be with Roxanne. Eleanor's words were a storm of fury. "You're a liar," she said. He froze, his jaw tightening, but Eleanor's confidence surged. She was no longer a ghost. She had power, and when Kenny reached for her, anger in his eyes, he pushed her too far. Jade stumbled and fell, her head hitting the sharp corner of the marble island with a sickening crack. The world went black. Kenny clinked his glass against hers. "To freedom," he repeated, the word tasting like ashes in his mouth. They were free. They were safe. They had gotten away with it. A cold trail. 2 days later, a conveniently frantic Kenny Randall walked into the 16th precinct of the Boston Police Department and reported his pregnant wife, Jade Michael, missing. He wrung his hands, his voice thick with rehearsed emotion. As he told the desk sergeant, she had been depressed, acting erratically, and that he was worried sick. The case landed on the desk of Chief Inspector David Miller, and the game was about to change. Chief Inspector Miller felt a familiar weariness settle into his bones as he drove his modest sedan up the winding driveway of the Randall estate. The place did not look like a home. It looked like a fortress of wealth, a sterile monument of glass and white stone that seemed to reject the very cliffs it was built upon. In his 30 years on the force, Miller had learned that the bigger the house, the bigger the secrets. And this house was immense. He was met at the door by Kenny Randall himself. The man was exactly what Miller had expected. Tall, handsome, impeccably dressed in a sober gray cashmere sweater that probably cost more than Miller's monthly mortgage payment. He radiated an aura of controlled, pained power. It was a performance, and Miller recognized it instantly. He'd seen it 100 times before. "Inspector, thank you for coming so quickly," Kenny said, his voice a carefully modulated baritone, thick with rehearsed emotion. He shook Miller's hand, his grip firm, his eyes holding a practiced look of desperation. "Mr. Randall," Miller said, his own voice a loud rumble, "why don't you walk me through what happened?" The tour was a masterclass in performative grief. Kenny pointed to significant empty spaces in the cavernous house. This was Eleanor's favorite reading nook, he would say, gesturing to a sleek, uncomfortable-looking Shaw's lounge. A pristine hardcover novel sat on an end table next to a half-finished cup of herbal tea. Everything was too perfect, like a theater set. Miller noted that there were no personal photographs, no clutter of a life lived, only curated art and expensive furniture. The air was cold with a faint smell of lemon cleaner, and the sickly sweet ferial scent of white lees that stood stiffly in a giant vase in the entranceway. "I just don't understand it," Kenny said, pausing to rub his temples. "She was so excited about the baby. A little hormonal, maybe moody, but it's not like her to just run off." "When was the last time you saw her, Mr. Randall?" Miller's question was casual, but his eyes were sharp, cataloging the absences. "Saturday night," Kenny replied smoothly. "I had to go to the office. A last-minute emergency with our Asian markets. I told her not to wait up for me. When I got home around 2 she was gone. Her car was gone. I just assumed she'd gone for a drive to clear her head. We'd had a small disagreement. Nothing major. And you didn't call us until this afternoon, Monday?" Miller's question was casual, but his eyes were sharp. "That's nearly 36 hours. I didn't want to overreact," Kenny said. The explanation coming a little too quickly. "She's done this before. After an argument, gone to stay with her sister for a night. I called her sister, her friends. No one had heard from her. That's when I started to panic. I feel like such a fool for waiting." He let his voice crack just enough to be convincing. Miller simply nodded, his face impassive. "Verify alibi. Verify friends, verify sister. Note the delay." The story was plausible on the surface, but it felt hollow. It was a story designed to be told to the police. The initial sweep of the house was fruitless. The forensics team, led by a meticulous veteran named Commissioner Delgado, found nothing. No signs of a struggle, no suicide note, no blood. The kitchen, where Kenny said they last spoke, was the most troubling part. "It's clean," Delgado told Miller, peeling off his latex gloves. "I mean professionally clean. There's a faint smell of bleach under the citrus cleaner." They couldn't find a single clear print on the countertops or appliances, not even Eleanor's. A clean crime scene was always a loud alarm bell. It screamed cover-up. The only thing they found was a single long dark hair near the base of the marble kitchen island caught in the grout. It was too long and dark to be Eleanor's, and they bagged it. A single lonely clue in a sterile sea of nothingness. The break came the following afternoon. A patrol unit running license plates at Boston's Logan Airport got a hit on Ella Laner's silver Mercedes. It was parked on the 4th level of the labyrinthine long-term parking garage. The air in the garage was thick with the smell of exhaust and stale recycled air. Miller supervised the forensics team as they descended on the vehicle. It was also clean. The steering wheel, the gear shift, the door handles, all wiped clean. The ticket on the dashboard was time-stamped 11:47 p.m. on Saturday night. Another dead end. The scene was perfectly staged to suggest a woman fleeing her life, catching a plane to anywhere. But Kenny Randall, for all his meticulous planning, had made a colossal error in judgment. A detective, a sharp young officer named Agent Chen, called from the passenger side of the car. "You want to see this?" There, on the luxurious leather of the passenger seat, almost hidden in the dim light, was a simple, expensive-looking leather-bound handbag. It seemed impossible that a woman in a hurry to flee would forget her purse. Miller's weary heart gave a heavy thump against his ribs. This was it. This was the mistake. Back at the precinct, under the sterile glare of the lab lights, they carefully inventoried the contents of the handbag. It was a window into Ella Laner's life, a wallet containing a few hundred in cash and a row of credit cards, a set of keys, a tube of expensive lipstick, a bottle of prenatal vitamins, and a paperback novel. And then at the bottom, wrapped in a protective plastic sleeve, was a simple leather-bound diary. Miller handled the diary as if it were a sacred artifact. He opened it carefully. The pages smelled faintly of old paper, and a light floral perfume he now associated with the ghost of Eleanor Michael. He began to read, and the carefully constructed facade of Kenny Randall began to crumble. He read for hours, ignoring theranging phones and the chatter of the squad room. He read of Eleanor's crushing loneliness, her growing fear of her husband, her methodical documentation of his lies. And then he came to a name written over and over. Roxanne Ortega via the diary detailed the late-night calls, the scent of turpentine and perfume on Kenny's clothes, the discovery of the affair. Miller's next stop was Roxanne Ortega's loft. The converted warehouse district was a world away from the manicured perfection of the Randall estate. He found her working on a massive, violent canvas splattered with paint, her clothes and hands stained. She was striking, exuding the intense, focused confidence of an artist. She played the part of the concerned acquaintance, her brow furrowed with artistic sympathy. "It's just tragic," she said, wiping her hands on a rag, the thick smell of oil paint in the air. "Poor Eleanor. I barely knew her. Of course I know Kenny through my work. He's a wonderful, generous man. I can't imagine what he must be going through." "When was the last time you saw Mr. Randall?" Miller asked, his tone deceptively casual. "Oh, let me think," she said, tilting her head in a gesture that seemed rehearsed. "It must have been last week before his trip. He came to see a new piece." "Not Saturday night?" Miller asked, watching her face closely. For a split second, a flash of pure panic crossed her features before she could control it. "Saturday?" she laughed, a sound a little too high-pitched. "No, I was here, immersed in my work. I was alone all night." Miller let a small, humorless smile touch his lips. It was a complete bluff, a shot in the dark. But his gut told him it would hit its mark. "That's funny because we have a witness who saw Mr. Randall's car parked right outside your building for several hours on Saturday night. It's hard to mistake a car like his." It was a complete lie, but she didn't know that. Roxanne palled visibly. The color drained from her face, leaving her skin the salo color of an unprimed canvas. That's impossible," she stammered. "Your witness must be mistaken. There are many cars." Miller didn't press. He didn't need to. He had seen the truth in her eyes. He left her standing motionless in the middle of her studio like a deer caught in headlights. Back in his car, the city lights blurred through the rain-soaked windshield. Miller felt the pieces of the case clicking into place. A lying husband, a lying mistress, a coordinated alibi. A body was missing, but he could smell a murder in the air. That night, back at his desk, he turned to the final pages of the diary, the ones Jade had written in the last days of her life. And that's when the case exploded. He heard about the safe, the files, the shell companies, the systematic fraud. He read her declaration of war. "He thinks I am weak. He thinks I am a fool. He has no idea what I am capable of. He is about to find out. This is no longer just about the affair. This is about survival." Miller's blood ran cold. This wasn't a simple love triangle that had exploded into violence. This was an execution. Kenny Randall hadn't killed his wife because she had found out about his girlfriend. He had killed her because she had found the key to his fraudulent kingdom and was about to set it on fire. Jade Ruiz. Michael had not just been a scorned wife. She had been a threat to his entire empire. He grabbed the phone, his knuckles white, and dialed the district attorney's office. "This is Miller," he said, his voice a low, grim growl. "I need a warrant. A full financial warrant for Kenny Randall, his businesses, and every shell company he has ever touched. Our missing person is now the victim in a homicide investigation, and I believe we're about to uncover one of the biggest financial frauds this city has seen in years." The diary had opened the door. Now it was time to kick it down and see what monsters were hiding in the darkness. Justice is served. The leather-bound diary lay on Chief Inspector Miller's desk, like a time bomb under the harsh, buzzing fluorescent lights of the squad room. It felt less like an object and more like a presence. It was Jade Ruiz Michael, and she was finally ready to speak. Miller, along with his sharp young partner, Agent Chen, began the solemn task of dissecting her final months, treating each page as a witness statement from the grave. The early entries painted a bleak portrait of deep loneliness, a slow-motion poisoning of the spirit. They weren't just accounts of sadness. They were accusations of neglect written in a precise, elegant hand that belied the turmoil within. August 14th, another night alone. Kenny called to say he was stuck in a board meeting. I heard music in the background. Laughter. A woman's laughter. When I asked him about it, he said it was the television in the conference room. He lies so easily now. It's like breathing for him. I wonder if he ever told the truth. Even at the beginning, she's methodical, Chin observed, looking up from the photocopied page. She notes dates, times, excuses. She's not just venting. She's building a record. Miller nodded grimly. She was a librarian. She knew how to catalog information. She was cataloging her own misery. The tone of the diary shifted from melancholy to anguish after the charity gala. The nebulous fear of an affair now had anim and a face. Roxanne Ortega. Eleanor's entries became sharper, infused with the painful specific details of the betrayal. October 12th. Her name is Roxanne Ortega, the artist. Of course, it makes perfect sense. He's not just sleeping with her. He adores her. He talks about her vision, her genius. He's never used those words about me. I was just convenient. A suitable accessory, a womb. I looked up her work online tonight. It's all furious brushstrokes of color, chaotic and violent. Is that what he sees in her? A reflection of his own soul, or just a fire to warm himself while I freeze in this glass palace? But the real bombshell came in the final fateful entries. The discovery of the files in Kenny's safe transformed the diary from a chronicle of a broken heart into the cornerstone of a major criminal investigation. Eleanor's voice changed. Her fear was replaced by a cold, electrifying determination. This was no longer the diary of a victim, but the field log of a combatant. December 7th, I have them. All of them. The files from the safe. It's worse than I ever imagined. It's not just tax evasion. It's a massive Ponzi scheme, it seems. He's been using new investor money to pay off old ones, propping up his real estate ventures with phantom profits. The entire Randall empire, this glass house, is built on sand, and the tide is about to come in. He has used shell companies registered in the Cayman Islands, all with names from his favorite Shakespearean characters: Fortunate Investments, Prospero Assets. The irony is sickening. He sees himself as a master manipulator, a king pulling the strings, but he was careless. He used the same lawyer, a man named Mark Torres, to set them all up. His signature is on every document. Miller paused, his pen suspended over his notepad. Mark Torres, he underlined the name 3 times. Get me everything on this guy, he told Chen. And find a lawyer named Sarah Molina, who specializes in forensic accounting. Jade spoke with her. The next pages contained a meticulously transcribed list of account numbers, transaction dates, and corporate entities. It was a detailed road map of Kenny's criminal enterprise. Jade had not only found the weapon, but she had also provided the ballistics report. The team moved with renewed urgency. The financial warrant, fast-tracked by a judge who saw the potential scale of the fraud, came down at dawn. Miller sent 2 of his most experienced detectives, a pair of grizzled veterans named Ali and Diaz, to visit Mark Torres. Torres's office wastes on the top floor of a downtown skyscraper, a symphony of polished mahogany and smug success. He received the detectives with the unctuous confidence of a man who believed himself untouchable. That confidence evaporated the moment Ali slid the warrant across the massive desk. A financial warrant? Torres scoffed, barely looking at it. This is harassment. I'll have to ask you to direct any questions to me. This isn't a friendly chat, Mr. Torres. Diaz interrupted, his voice like gravel. This is a homicide investigation, and right now your name shows up alongside terms like criminal conspiracy, wire fraud, and accessory to murder. We can have this conversation here, or we can have it in a much smaller room downtown. You choose. The color drained from Torres's face. The mention of murder shattered his carefully constructed facade. He stammered about attorney-client privilege, but his eyes were darting around the room like a trapped animal looking for an escape route. He was sweating, his hand trembling as he tried to pick up the phone to call his own lawyer. The detectives didn't need a confession. They had his fear. It was just as good. Meanwhile, Miller and Chen visited Sarah Molina. Her office was the polar opposite of Torres's, modest, cluttered, and practical. She was a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 40s. Yes, I remember the call, she confirmed, looking at them over her glasses after Miller explained the situation. She didn't give a name. She said her husband was a prominent businessman. She walked me through a hypothetical scenario that involved offshore accounts and overlapping investments to hide income. I'll be honest with you, detectives. It sounded less like a hypothetical and more like she was reading from a textbook on how to run a Ponzi scheme. Did she sound scared? Chin asked. Sarah Molina paused, considering. Not scared, determined. There was steel in her voice. She said the proof was irrefutable, and she intended to use it to secure her freedom and her child's future. She was supposed to call me back to schedule a formal consultation. She never did. Back at the precinct, the last pieces fell into place with stunning speed. The lab report on the single dark hair found near the kitchen island came back. The DNA was a perfect match for Roxanne Ortega. Miller stood in front of the large whiteboard, a storm of evidence swirling around the photos of the 3 protagonists. He drew a thick red line from Kenny to Roxanne, labeling it affair. He drew another from Kenny to Mark Torres, labeling it financial fraud. Then he drew a circle around Eleanor's smiling photo and from her arrows that pointed to every piece of the puzzle. She was the center. She was the one who connected it all. So here's our timeline, Miller said, pacing in front of the board, his voice low and intense. Jade discovers the affair. That's a motive for divorce. But then she discovers the fraud. That's a motive for murder. Kenny Randall isn't just facing the loss of half his assets. He's facing 20 years in federal prison. His whole kingdom is about to collapse. She confronts him Saturday night. He realizes she's not lying. Chen picked up the thread. He panics. "No," Miller corrected, stopping his pacing. "This guy doesn't panic. He rages." Ellenaria mentioned his temper in the diary. "He doesn't see a problem to be solved. He sees an existential threat to be eliminated." He tapped Kenny's photo. "A narcissist like this, when he's cornered, doesn't negotiate. He annihilates." "And Roxanne was there," Shen added, pointing to the lab report pinned to the board. "She lied about being at their studio. She was at the house." "She was either a participant or a witness," Miller agreed. "Either way, she's an accomplice. They kill Eleanor. Probably an impulsive act of violence during the argument. A shove, a fall, a blow against that marble island. Then the cleanup. They scrub the kitchen, get rid of the body, stage the car at the airport to make it look like she ran away. A distraught husband reports his unstable pregnant wife missing. It's a textbook. Clean cover-up." He paused, picking up the leather-bound diary from the evidence table. But they made one fatal mistake. In their arrogance, in their haste to get rid of the woman, they forgot her words. They forgot her mind. They left behind the most powerful witness against them. He looked at the faces of his team, the grim reality of the case settling on them. They had gone from a missing person case to a complex web of infidelity, corporate crime, and murder in less than 48 hours. All because a woman had the courage to write it all down. "All right," Miller said, his voice hard as iron. "Let's go get them. Let's see how well Mr. Randall's and Ms. Ortega's stories hold up when they're not celebrating their freedom, but sitting in separate interrogation rooms, facing charges of first-degree murder." The diary had done its job. It had spoken for the victim. Now it was time for the law to pull the monsters out of the darkness. The final twist. The arrests were timed with military precision, executed in the cold gray moments just before dawn at the Randall mansion. The silent majesty of the glass and stone structure was shattered by the loud, authoritative knock on the door. Kenny Randall, wearing a black silk robe, opened it himself. The mask of the grieving husband, so carefully worn for days, disintegrated in an instant. It wasn't fear or surprise that glinted in his eyes, but a chilling, contemptuous fury. He looked insulted by the intrusion, by the sheer audacity of the law breaking into his kingdom. He said nothing as the handcuffs were closed around his wrists, his gaze fixed on Chief Inspector Miller, a look of pure reptilian hatred that promised retribution. Miles away, the scene at Roxanne Ortega's loft was one of chaotic theatrical desperation. She opened the door in a paint-splattered jumpsuit, her wild hair a halo around her pale, tear-streaked face. When the detectives identified themselves, she collapsed, a puppet with its strings cut, her sobs echoing in the vast warehouse space among her violent, furious canvases. It was Kenny. She shrieked, her voice a jarring instrument of practiced victimhood. "He lied to me. I don't know anything. I'm a victim too." It was a convincing performance, but Miller had read Eleanor's diary. He knew Roxanne was a victim of no one but herself. At the precinct, they were placed in separate, sterile interrogation rooms. The stark white walls and blankness were an unholy confession. The air hummed with the silent tension of a game about to begin. Miller's strategy was classic, a test of loyalty between two people who had none. He started with Roxanne, letting her stew for nearly an hour, her sobs subsiding into hiccuping, ragged breaths. When Heffenly went in, he projected an air of weary sympathy. "This is a mess, isn't it, Roxanne?" he began, placing a cup of water on the metal table. "He's a monster," she whispered, grabbing the cup with trembling hands. "He told me she was unstable. He said he was afraid she would harm the baby, that she was suicidal." "He lied to you about a lot of things," Miller said, his voice soft. He let a moment of silence pass. "You knew his business was a sham, a multi-million-dollar Ponzi scheme on the brink of collapse. Jade discovered it. She found evidence that could send him to prison for the rest of his life. That's why he had to get rid of her, Roxanne. That's the real reason. It was never about saving you from the unstable wife. It was about saving himself from prison." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Were you there, Roxanne? Did you go to the house that night?" "No," she insisted, her voice cracking. "I was here. I was working all night. I swear," Miller sighed, a sound of profound disappointment. "That's a shame because we have you at the scene. We found one of your hairs in the kitchen. Long, dark, beautiful. A forensic coincidence." He watched as her bravado began to crumble. "We also have security footage from a neighbor's house that shows your car, that distinctive red convertible, leaving the Randall Street just after 1 in the morning, about an hour after Kenny left. And a witness saw Kenny carrying a heavy-duty tarp out to his car." Roxanne's last shred of composure shattered. She stared at him, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. The lies she had built dissolved before immutable facts. The fight drained out of her, replaced by a raw animal panic. It was the frantic calculation of self-preservation. He called me. The words tumbled out in a desperate, chaotic torrent. He was in a panic. He said she attacked him, that she went crazy and fell. He said it was an accident. He begged me to come. He said he was scared. He has a bad temper. You don't know what he's like. I only helped because I was afraid of him. She was sobbing again, but these were the tears of a cornered animal, not of grief. She gave them the location of the cliff, a desperate offering to save herself, attributing every ounce of malice and intent directly to her lover. Armed with a confession and a location, Miller walked down the hall to Kenny's room. The millionaire was sitting stiffly, the picture of defiant arrogance. Miller said nothing. He simply placed the leather-bound diary on the table between them. Kenny's eyes fixed on the book. For a single unguarded moment, his mask of icy control slipped. It was a flash of pure, unadulterated dread. The only variable he had failed to control. The one detail he had overlooked in Hispanic meticulous cleanup. "We found it, Kenny," Miller said, his voice quiet. "But with the weight of doom, in her handbag, in her car at the airport, you made a mistake. You forgot her diary." Miller opened the book, not to the last page, but to an entry from months earlier. He read aloud Eleanor's words about her loneliness, about feeling like a ghost in her own home, about her hopes for the baby. Then he turned to another, her account of the humiliation she felt at the gala, seeing him with Roxanne. His voice was flat, dispassionate, letting Eleanor's words fill the sterile room. Finally, he turned to the last entry, Andrea her premonition aloud, her fear of his temper, her promise not to Besselinst. When he finished, the silence was a physical thing that pressed down on them. "Your girlfriend is in the next room," Miller said conversationally. "She's confessed everything. She's painting a very detailed picture for the Diado, a picture of a cold-blooded murderer who manipulated her and forced her to help cover up the murder of his pregnant wife. She's saving herself, Kenny. She gave you up to save her own skin." Kenny's jaw was a granite knot. His knuckles were white where he gripped the edge of the table. He was a king whose castle had just been stormed, whose subjects had betrayed him. And it was this one small and insignificant book that had brought it all crashing down. His quiet, obedient wife had been the architect of his destruction. But the story, Miller would soon learn, had one last stunning chapter. As the dive teams recovered Eleanor's body from the unforgiving sea and the district attorney's office celebrated their airtight case, a few loose ends began to bother the inspector. The medical examiner's report landed on his desk. The cause of death was unexpected blunt force trauma to the head. But the toxicology report contained an anomaly. There were trace amounts of a powerful, fast-acting sedative in Eleanor's system. Not enough to kill her, but certainly enough to leave a person woozy, confused, and physically impaired. It was not a medication any of her doctors had prescribed. Then a junior detective who was recataloguing the evidence from Eleanor's car filed a report. The small escape handbag and the burner phone she had mentioned in her diary were missing. They were not in her handbag and they were not in the trunk. They had simply vanished. Miller sat in his office late into the night, the diary open before him. The medical examiner's report at this side. The pieces did not fit the narrative of a simple confrontation gone wrong. A sedative, a missing escape bag. Her last words echoed in his mind. "I have a plan. I pray I am strong enough to carry it out." And what if the confrontation was not the plan? What if it was the plan? Crumbling because of an instinct he had served for 30 years, Miller made a request. He wanted the passenger manifest for every international flight that left Logan Airport on Saturday night. His team worked through the night, fueled by black coffee and the thrill of the hunt. At 4 in the morning, they found it, a one-way ticket to Buenos Aires, Argentina. It had been purchased with cash a week earlier. The name on the ticket was not Jade Ruiz Michael. It was Jade Ruiz. A quick check of Eleanor's records confirmed it. Ruiz was her mother's maiden name. The stunning final truth hit Miller with the force of a physical blow. Eleanor's plan was never to confront Kenny and beg for a divorce. That was what she wrote for them to find. Her true plan was far more audacious. She was going toastscape. She had likely drugged Kenny's coffee, planning to incapacitate him long enough to retrieve the original financial documents from his safe, grab her escape bag, and vanish into the night to start a new life with her child in South America. But Kenny's unexpected decision to leave for Roxanne's loft that night had foiled her desperate, brilliant plan. He had left before the sedative could fully take effect, forcing a premature, improvised confrontation. The struggle was real. The fatal blow was real. But her intention had never been to face the monster. It had been to flee from him. She had been agonizingly close to freedom. In the end, the weight of the evidence, the diary, the financial crimes, Roxanne's testimony, and the body was overwhelming. Kenny Randall was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He raged in the courtroom, a terrifying spectacle. Roxanne Ortega, for her role as an accomplice, received a 15-year sentence. The Randall Empire, a shimmering mirage built on fraud, evaporated, leaving a trail of devastated investors. The glass house on the cliff was eventually sold, a monument to a spectacular downfall. And locked away in an evidence room, the leather-bound diary remained as the final testament of Jade Ruiz Michael, a woman whom everyone had underestimated. She had not survived the storm, but from beyond the grave, her words had unleashed a hurricane of truth, ensuring that the man who took her life and the woman who helped him would never again taste the freedom they had so celebrated. This story is a chilling reminder that the most dangerous secrets are often hidden behind the most perfect facades.